you know. And that's one of the toughest piece, because if you're talking about building something for a 20 or 50 years, is the culture which you build in your organizations, in an academic institution is very important. And somewhere you have to create positive spiral of performance. So every small, positive thing you have to celebrate, in a community, and create that positive spiral of performance and focus on a long term. So, if I had to just summarize once again, I would say you got to talk about a minimum 20 years, Unfortunately, because our students work in an environment, or sometimes our board members work in an environment, which is what I showed as the corporate sector, where everything changes so fast, so people expect results in 2 years or 3 years. So I think it's extremely important to focus on keep talking about a long term, and this idea of a focus. And I just want to talk about this again. Values and culture are going to be the most important elements, which will define your institution. And you're going to keep talking about it all the time, because all of us get bogged down with day-to-day. All of us have day-to-day pressures. As you're saying, we're going to have run classes, the labs, students have expectations, but somewhere this idea that this is our long-term thinking, and keep talking about it every forum, and obviously partnership, because finally none of this we'll be able to do it alone. And obviously you also have to hope that luck is on your side, right? Somewhere luck also plays a role. Thank you. 108 years institution, IIT Bombay is celebrating 50-year, 60-year Diamond Jubilee celebrations, and we are a less than 8-year institution. So, what I'm going to talk about is much more. I think they can talk about accomplishment. I'm going to talk much more about the intent, in terms of the way we have looked at of building a new institution. So we started in 2011, and I had a unique advantage of being the first employee of the institution. So in some sense it gives you a lot of freedom in terms of the way one wants to build an institution. And I was also extremely lucky that we had a board which was wonderful board, and the chairman was Shri C.K. Birla, and who supported us in terms of saying, basically he said, look, the education part, you do what you want, right? We will support you. It's wonderful to have that kind of support. So I think what we did was, we asked this question that, if you're going to have this idea of starting a new institution, what can we learn from existing institution? So obviously by that time, actually both Ahmedabad and Calcutta had completed 50 years. So we had this advantage of, institution which had done extremely well in certain areas. But we also wanted to look at globally. So for example, Harvard had completed 100 years, business school I'm talking about, 100 years at that point in time, and they had come out with the studies in terms of what needs to be done of a future of MBA. So we had some, advantage of looking at all that. And obviously, all of us have large number of stakeholders, and we try and, balance this. How do you manage this various stakeholders? So, what we did was, we said, let's try and understand how do great institutions are built. Okay. So, right now I'm giving you data 2018, but that time we looked at data 2011. So we said, let's look at this top 100 institutions, and here is top 10 institutions. And when you look at the data, it's, for a young institution, it shows that the youngest institution in this was 125-year-old, right? So one thing which we all need to recognize, that we are very different compared to outside world. Education institutions are built over a very long time, and this whole idea that top 10 institutions are 120, youngest is 125-year-old, And if you had looked at this data in 2008, for example, I've given you this 2018, honestly nothing would be different. It'll be more or less same, and very likely 2028, this list would be more or less similar. So I think one is that, which is very different from, if you look at a corporate world, where our students go and work, that world is very different. So for example, if I give this data of looking at a market capitalization of, top 10 firms in 2017, and if you had looked at that data in 2009, you would find only 2 out that Jeff Bezos, Amazon, he said we are going to definitely go bankrupt at some day. All we can do is, prolong that if we are more. But our world is very different. The education, so I think that recognition that we can't be doing things for our 2 years, 5 years kind of thing. We have to have a horizon which are very long. But in that top 100 institutions, there are some interesting data. So we looked at institutions which were less than 50-year-old institution. Okay, saying look, 100 and all is too far. But there are some 6 institutions which are less than 50 and seems to have done very well. And interestingly, all those 6 institutions are our part of world. So which is very interesting, that when I showed those first top 10 institutions, all were from West. But when we look at out of top 100, the 6 institutions which have managed to get into top 100 and which are less than 50, all come from our part of world. And I think it'll be interesting to understand how some of them have done this. So for example, Nanyang, right? Started in 1981, and he's talking about a rank of 11 today. Hong Kong University of Technology, HKUST, very interesting institution in terms of what they have managed to do in 25 years. And especially, for us who have come from management field, we realized that so to some extent, somebody could say that finally building education institutions is very simple. I think Professor Das talked about it. You get wonderful people and create a wonderful environment. Only thing, you have to just keep doing it for 50 years. If you can manage to do that, get wonderful people, create a wonderful environment, then automatically you will be but unfortunately, that creating that wonderful environment and sustaining that is not as easy. Both the institutions, in Institute of Science, he talked about those detailed processes in the way they look at faculty, right? I think somewhere, if you are able to build that, that only will build this culture of excellence, which in turn will make sure that you're a great institution over a period of time. And those are some of the lessons we learned by looking at some of this data. So, when we were doing this exercise, we said we're going to look at least 20-year horizon. Okay, so we're not going to look at anything from a 5-year perspective or a 10-year perspective. We build institution keeping a 20-year horizon, but obviously what we do in terms of initial years, in terms of building a culture, where do we focus our energy, will be very important. So what we did was, we asked a couple of questions in terms of what's our ambition. Once you talk about ambition, then who are our benchmarks, right? Somewhere you do worry about intensive. Whenever you talk about research, there's a huge research. Understanding your own environment, you work within certain constraints. They talked about this issue that why are we not able to attract international faculty? Some of the answers are simple, why we are not able to attract that, and which has an impact on your rankings. And as I said, the horizon, if you have a higher ambition, you have to have a horizon which is much longer. So we put together this, we looked at all the stakeholders and all that. We put together this diagram at that point in time, at the early stage. And one of the key thing was that unless we are able to crack research, there's no way we'll be able to build a great institution. Now, at that point in time, IIM should have done a great job in the education part, but you have not done a great job in the research. So we said, let's look at a benchmark as a top 200 schools in the world, and within that, over a 20-year horizon, can we be somewhere closer to 50 kind of thing? So top 1/3 somewhere. But the key challenge for us has been more on the research front, because unlike ISC and IIT, which had traditionally a research culture, but even there, as the thing was saying is earlier, right? The research culture was not there even in IITs, but now you're building that. So, when we did this exercise, the board essentially said, it's good to have a 20-year horizon, but give us something which is slightly shorter term, okay? Because they said in 20 years, neither you will be there nor board would be there. But we said we will not talk about anything which is less than 10 years. So first milestone we pushed together was saying that in 2020, let's look at how do we want to be within India kind of that. So we'll keep our reference as a global. So we said in a research, can we be in a top 3 in the country by looking at high quality publications. So what we have done is, yes, we're going to focus on the quality by looking at our top 24 management journals. And when you, at least in our field, it's reasonably, everybody would agree that if you're talking about marketing, these are the top 4 journals. If you're talking about operations, these are top 4 journals. And luckily there's one UT Dallas who maintains this database so anybody can track. So we said, can we be ambitious and say within country we'll be top 3 on this, and in 2030 can we be on the top 100 on this research publications in this top 24 journal, and then said on a popular ranking like NIRF and all, can we be in a top 10? Financially independent, because at some point government is going to stop supporting, so saying by 2020. And can we get one of the prestigious accreditation? So this ASSB is accreditation, and we said, can we get that early on? Now, actually, we are more or less there on all the parameters. So today we are in top 30 when it comes to this UT Dallas, publications. We have managed to get ASSB accreditation, which is probably we are one of the youngest institutes in the world to get this accreditation within less than 8 years kind of thing. What we realize is you need to work with a sharp focus. So there are several things which typical IIMs do. We said we are not going to do it. Because for example, if you want to get our faculty to spend time on research, so as I said, this was 2020, and we set similar goal we're going to set for 2030, which is much steeper, which is in terms of, so far we were talking about we'll compare within India, in 2030 we'll compare globally. So to signal some of this, now this may be obvious for an institution like IISc, but for a so from beginning we wanted to give a signal the faculty will spend highest amount of time on research. And somewhere it's played a very important role. Today, for example, we are able to attract young faculty mainly because of this. So we created the research ecosystem, this being one of them, on every dimension. So for example, we'll say we will support two international conferences a year. Similarly, there'll be not the 1.5 crore, which IIC talked about, or 20 lakh, which IIT Bombay talks about. But we are saying annually we will, because at least our people don't have to buy machines kind of thing. So we are saying we'll give 3.5 lakh per year as a discretionary grant, which you can do whatever you want. So today what we do is 20% of our budget, we put it as a faculty support. So we're saying we want to create a system where we say we will provide the highest support to faculty in the country within management institution. So what we found is when we created this entire research ecosystem, couple of those elements were that in terms of what kind of support we are going to provide to faculty. So we hire only young faculty and we invest heavily in them. And we say that 10 years down the line, you should be recognized. So if I am working in a very specific field of, let's say, organizational culture, then I should be known in that 200 people who work in that field. So saying, you decide what field you want to be. Our job is to support. So I think each institution will have to figure it out what kind of model you want to put in place. We've decided to put all our bets on the individual and saying if he fails, we also fail. So that's a model we've been working with. Somewhere it has helped us in attracting faculty. So you ask any young doctoral student today in management, we are aspiration institution. Just to give you an example, ISB has a very strong doctoral program and their first graduate was hired by London School of Economics. So they've been able to place their students very well. And for whatever reason, a lot of them have been looking at international placements, faculty. There are only 3 students who decided to opt in India and all 3 are with us. So somewhere for a young faculty, we've been able to create this culture that we are going to invest heavily in your career. And with a result, we are able to attract faculty. So the entire focus is on, saying we're going to invest in you, and but you have to aim very high, right? And you have to work with a 10-year kind of horizon, not talking about, so we don't worry about if somebody doesn't give us a publication in first 5 years. Because you're saying you're going to aim very high, we're going to focus only on quality. So to facilitate one of those things, we created academic advisory board, and I think that has really helped us, because one concern typically one has is, especially management institution, we used to have a board which will be mainly corporate, and a lot of them may not understand the research. So how do you build a great research environment? We've created academic advisory board, which has helped us in creating this entire research ecosystem in terms of, so whether we talk about our promotion systems, whether we talk about research incentive schemes, all of them have been, around how do you create a great research ecosystem which will be aimed at publishing in a top quality journals. And then somewhere in the 2013, board, faculty, all of us put together certain what do we want to do, the various goals we talked about. We did a visioning workshop where all of us got together and built, some of this vision statement. Yeah. So somewhere, whatever little experience I have had, if I had to summarize in terms of how do you build a culture how do you build a great institution, I think it's important to create that shared vision, which, all of us collectively own it. Right? And shape expectations of several parties. So what happens is, I'm sure they didn't talk about it, but the kind of pressure I'm sure those institutions have from various parts of, various government departments has expectations, state has expectations, alumni has expectations, everybody has expectations. Now, you need to be extremely careful because you cannot satisfy everybody. And everybody would like institution to drive in some particular way. So I think how do you have your vision and somehow manage all the stakeholders in actually saying no to a lot of things. Because, so for example, one decision we had taken was that faculty will not get into administration. That's a decision we have taken, and we're saying faculty will be involved in governance, but no faculty will do administration. So that's something, we have tried to put in place. Second, we said, again, this is more relevant from management institution, we are saying in the first 10 years, we will not do executive education at all, because we want to stay focused on research. So we are the only management institution who don't do executive education. So I think somewhere creating that focus and ensuring that you're able to shape the expectations of all the stakeholders